pharmaceutical space and what's been happening? Remember, everyone's been talking about it in the positive light, with the rupee doing what it's doing. Pharma exporters will be major beneficiaries. But what's the outlook for the industry as a whole and what's been happening there? Let's get in Kiran Mazumdar Shaw of Biocon to discuss all of this in greater detail. Biocon right now is down about 1% in the session. Starting off first, Ms. Shaw, on the growth outlook for the overall domestic pharmaceutical industry in 2012.
Well, I think you have to look at the healthcare segment in India in a near-term and a medium to long-term manner. In the near term, I think in 2012, I think the Indian domestic market is going to remain fairly buoyant. I think there is going to be a good demand on the healthcare sector. And I think in terms of the market, it's going to grow for sure because, there is greater investment in the healthcare sector. I think we are seeing a larger number of people coming under the insurance net. And we are also seeing a larger commitment from the government in terms of healthcare spends. So overall, I think the domestic industry is definitely going to grow. But having said that, I also believe that there are going to be price constraints. We are already seeing the NPPA come down quite heavily on price control. I think it is going to veer towards institutional buying, and I think that's going to also curtail pricing of drugs. So whilst there's going to be a huge volume growth, I think there's going to be a muted value growth. That's on the very large, broad perspective. But I also believe that we are going to see a lot of new molecule launches in India. We are also seeing that multinationals are ramping up and getting much more excited about the Indian domestic market. And we are seeing them launch several new molecules. In recent times, we've heard many of the multinationals like Merck, Pfizer, Novartis, all, announcing that they're going to bring in new molecules into the Indian market. And this, of course, is going to see then a value improvement in terms of the market dynamics.
Sure, what about the overall macro environment right now? And do you believe that investment in the healthcare industry is going to be significantly lower in 2012 because of that?
Healthcare is one sector that is not directly linked to macroeconomics. I mean, people fall ill and I think they need to be treated. So you can't sort of link that to economic crises. I mean, it's just got to address a natural need of human beings. So I think from that point of view, you are not going to really see it directly linked to the economic, challenges that the world is facing or India is going to be facing. But I think in terms of investment in healthcare, where the government is, clearly aware of the need to invest more and more in healthcare. We are already talking about at least spending 2% of our GDP on healthcare. We are also seeing that there are projections that 750 million people are likely to come under health insurance by 2020. We are also seeing that 100 million Indians are going to, climb into the upper middle class income bracket. So all this is going to definitely behove well for the healthcare sector. So that's the way I look at it overall. In terms of exports, I think Indian industry has a very large opportunity. Globally, developed economies particularly, are challenged with rising healthcare costs. And there is a very, very urgent and large effort to curtail healthcare spends. And there, of course, generics are playing a very, very important role. And certainly Indian generic companies are in a position to capture a large part of that opportunity, because India continues to be the lowest cost generics manufacturer and marketer. So I think from that point of view, India is going to benefit. And then, of course, if you look at the way the rupee is going, then I think, the healthcare sector in India is going to benefit from these exports in terms of realization.
Let's talk a little bit more about, the currency movement and the impact of that for the pharma sector, particularly in 2012. What's the outlook there?
It will contribute significantly to better growth. But having said that, I think there's a net kind of gain that we will have to look at, because there are a lot of imports also performed by the Indian pharmaceutical sector. So I think there is going to be a net positive gain for the healthcare sector in India. But certainly the rupee is going to play a very large role in that.
What about mergers and mergers and acquisitions? That's been a very active part in 2011, 2010. So basically over the last 2 to 3 years, you've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions taking place in the industry. Will that continue? Do you think that that's the road forward for major players?
I think you are going to see some more M&A activity, at least that's the way it looks, because there is a lot of excitement and focus and a kind of a herd-like mentality to see whether they can get a foothold in the Indian market. Largely because of the projections that are being made in terms of the size of the Indian market. The Indian market is forecast to be a $50 billion market by 2020, and even a much larger market by 2025. So I think the way they are forecasting the growth of the Indian market, I think people want to very much be a part of that business. So if you consider all that, there is going to be a strategic intent for companies to acquire companies in India and make sure that they have a strong foothold in India. So I do think that there is going to be, continued M&A interest and activity in the Indian market, and where a large number of Indian companies are potentially the target.
In terms of, growth and specific areas in the pharmaceutical space that could see a multifold growth in 2012. Any particular areas that are showing you signs of strength, tremendous strength rather?
Given the impending patent cliff, which is, almost like a continuous cliff over the next several years, I think generics continues to be a very strong growth vertical for the Indian healthcare sector. But I also believe that, biosimilars / biogenerics are also going to be very important for Indian companies. And I think over the next 5 years, you're going to see some interesting growth opportunities in the emerging markets in these kind of spaces. And then, of course, the research services sector is also seeing some good traction. In healthcare as such, I think hospitals are also seeing a good traction in terms of expansion and new hospitals coming up. One of the things that remains to be seen is whether this whole concept of specialty clinics, is that going to be sustainable? Because you are seeing a number of skin care clinics, dental clinics, outpatient clinics, and so on and so forth. There seems to be a lot of interest. These are kind of ramping up. And I think you have to watch this space to see whether they're really sustainable long term, or are they, going to be just limited by their own kind of business model.
Lastly, just a word, we've got the budget around the corner. Any expectations in terms of government support to enhance growth in the pharmaceutical industry?
I have always been very focused on this whole aspect of drug innovation. And I believe that the government must certainly support innovation in every way possible. And it is. I mean, a large number of funding and incubation funds have been announced by the government in recent times. And I think they need to make sure that they create a very good ecosystem for innovation. So investing in research and development both in industry as well as in the academia, is extremely important. Apart from that, I believe that we do need greater investment by the government in addressing a healthcare system for the country. And here I believe that state governments are beginning to do it quite well, but I think they need to amplify this in a much, much bigger way. So I think you need to link it to an insurance reimbursement scheme for it to really be sustainable. Because right now I think whilst there are certain segments of the public sector or the army, defense, and certain state governments taking certain initiatives in certain disease segments, and also in, say, immunization, I think it has to go beyond that. And for that to happen, I think there needs to be increased government spend in healthcare.
Kiran Mazumdar Shaw of Biocon talking about the industry, the growth areas, and the expectations from the government with respect to growth. Biocon, they're down about 2%, also talking about a positive impact that the rupee is going to bring about for them. On